Welcome everyone. I'm going to mute everybody for the benefit of the share. I wish everyone a good Yantav because we're about to go into Shabbos and it's right away into Shavuot. And this portion by BAMIDBAR always, interestingly, falls in the Shabbat just before Shavuot. So we're going to go through a summary as we always do. What does BAMIDBAR talk about? So the book of BAMIDBAR opens up on the 1st of Iyar, on the second year. So we left Pesach in Nisan, we left Mitzrayim. A year later, plus a month, is when we're talking about in the time frame of reference. A year plus a month after we left Egypt. Hashem tells us to count all the Jewish people. In fact, in the classic name of the book of BAMIDBAR, which really means in the wilderness, is Chumash HaPikudim, the book of counting. That's the reason why in English we call the fourth book of the Torah the book of numbers. In fact, that's quite appropriate. It goes according to our tradition. It's the book that deals with numbers. Hashem counts us. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to count all the Jewish men of military age, which was from the age of 20 till the age of 60. Hashem names a Nasi for each tribe. A Nasi is a prince or a leader of each tribe, and he will assist with the census of that tribe. The Torah gives us the grand total of how many men between the age of 20 and 60, aside from the tribe of Levi, which we'll soon deal with, was 3,550. The Levim had specific duties to do. They are recorded again. They would dismantle the Mishkan, the sanctuary, when they would have to move from place to place. They would carry the various parts. There were 3 families of Levim, and each family was given a specific part of the sanctuary to carry when they moved from one place to another. And then they would re-erect the Mishkan at the destination that they had arrived to. The Levim camp around the Mishkan and guard over it and its vessels. We'll soon see a diagram that gives us an idea of how they encamped. So the actual camping formation, the Mishkan, which was the sanctuary, was right in the center of the encampment of the Jewish people. And then there were 4 flags. The 4 flags each had 3 tribes. 4 times 3 is 12 tribes. So you had 3 tribes living to the north, to the east, to the south, and to the west, all around the sanctuary. And the Torah tells us exactly which tribes camped with which tribes. Who were the 3 on each side? So the flag of Yehuda, they included the tribes of Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zebulun, and they were to the east of the Mishkan. The flag of Reuven had the sub-tribes of Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. They were to the south. The flag of Ephraim, they included the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh and Binyamin. They were to the west, and the flag of Dan included the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, and they were to the north. We'll soon see a diagram that actually shows that. The Levim were to serve and assist the Kohanim. This honor transferred from the firstborn after the sin of the golden calf. So let's just explain that a little more clearly. When we left Egypt, the duties of the representatives of the Jewish people to serve on behalf of the Jewish people in the Holy Temple, or at that time the Mishkan, was going to be the firstborn. Every firstborn was declared holy to Hashem, and every family would have their own kohen, because the firstborn son in each family was going to be the kohen, the person who would represent the Jewish people and serve in the temple, in the sanctuary. However, when the sin of the golden calf took place, the only tribe that did not involve themselves in that sin, and in fact stood up for the honor of Moshe and of Hashem, was the tribe of Levi. And for that reason, the privilege of being the Kohanim, those who would serve Hashem on behalf of the Jewish people in the sanctuary, was transferred from the firstborn of the Jewish people to the tribe of Levi. We'll soon see when they did that, it wasn't the exact same amount of firstborn who were now going to have Kohanim replace, the tribe of Levi replace them. It wasn't the exact same amount. Now, when we counted the Levim, we count them from 1 month old. That's different, right? Because the rest of the Jewish people, we said we count from military age, from the age of 20 years till 60. The Levim were counted from the age of 1 month old. Why is 1 month such a significant number? Because by Jewish law, until a child passes the moment of 1 month old, they move from being a child that is still vulnerable, that life is not yet established. It's only after 30 days of life that the child moves from being a vulnerable birth into being a proper countable birth. So the first month, there are many laws, even the redemption of the firstborn, only happens after 30 days, after a month. Until a month, it's not considered a viable birth, or it's still vulnerable. After a month, the child has already moved into an established life. So the Levim were not counted from birth, but they were counted from 1 month, and hopefully we'll have time to explain at least an insight as to why they were different from the rest of the Jewish people. Everyone else was counted from 20 years, and the Levim counted from 1 month. Now we're going into the actual tribe of Levi, which was divided into 3 families: Gershon, Kahos, and Merari. The sub-family of the tribe of Levi, which were the descendants of Gershon, they camped to the west of the Mishkan. And their duties, Gershon's duties, was to transport what? The tapestries, the curtains, the Mishkan, and their accessories. That was the job of Gershon. Kahos, they camped to the south of the Mishkan, and they transported the holy vessels. So not the curtains and the coverings, but they transported the holy vessels such as the holy ark, the menorah, the holy table. That's what the tribe of Kahos did. The family of Kahos, which is a sub-family of the tribe of Levi. Levi had these 3 major families that made up the tribe of Levi. Then there was Merari. They camped to the north of the Mishkan, and their duties was to carry the beams, the panels, and the sockets. So you had one family carrying the curtains, the coverings, all the things that made up the Mishkan coverings. The middle family, Kahos, carried the holy items, the holy vessels, and Merari carried the beams that made up the extremities, the actual structure of the Mishkan. Now, Moshe, Aaron, and the family camped to the east of the Mishkan. I'm going to eventually show you the picture so that we're not just talking about it, but we'll get there. And then we'll revise it. Now, as I mentioned before, all of the firstborn who were destined to serve on behalf of the Jewish people in the sanctuary were now handing over their positions to the Levim. But guess what? There wasn't the exact same amount of firstborn as there were Levim. When the count of the firstborn, the holiness of each firstborn was transferred to the Levi, to the tribe of Levi, and the 273 more firstborn than there were Levim were redeemed. Now we get to the point of the redemption of those who were supposed to serve on behalf of the Jewish people. They could not hand over their position to the tribe of Levi because there were 273 more firstborn in the Jewish people than there were members of the tribe of Levi. So 1 for 1, 1 for 1, 1 for 1, and then there were 273 firstborn left over who didn't have a counterpart in the tribe of Levi to hand over their responsibility to. So those last 273 had their status redeemed. How? Through 5 shekel. How's that connected to anything we do today? Today, when a child is born, and we said the firstborn was normally dedicated to the sanctuary, would be handed over to Hashem to work in the sanctuary. When a firstborn is born into the Jewish people, a male, so we redeem that male at the end of 30 days. There are certain exceptions. If he's the son of a Levi or a Kohen, he doesn't need redemption because he's actually from the tribe that is in itself serving in their way. But if they are not born to Levim or to Kohanim, that child has to be redeemed with 5 shekels. That ceremony actually happens today. We've done many of them, and you need a kohen, and the kohen asks the family, but this is the origin. That redemption is 5 shekel. The family of Kohath worked from the age of 30 to the age of 50, and that's when they were counted for work. When the Mishkan was dismantled, Kohanim covered the vessels for Kohath to carry. So you had like a transition point. When the sanctuary was standing, strangers were not allowed into the sanctuary. So you couldn't actually have the Levim walk into the erected sanctuary and then start dismantling because they weren't allowed in there. So the Kohanim dismantled, and then they would cover each vessel, and then the Levim would come to carry the vessel, which was now ready for them and covered. I just want to see if I can get to a diagram so that we can do it while it's still fresh in our mind. After all my promises, I don't seem to have it. Not here anyway. Okay, I did try and take a picture out of one of the Chumashim that showed that the sanctuary in the middle, around them, a circle, well, not a circle because it's a square. To the north, south, east, and west, you had the families of the Levim, and beyond the extremities of the Levim families, you then had 3 tribes, the north, 3 tribes to the east, south, west. And they were called flags. Each set of 3 tribes fell under the flag of one of the dominant tribe of that side of the Mishkan. Let's go through some of the messages that we can take out of this week's portion. We said that this week's portion, BAMIDBAR, is always read this Shabbat before Shavuot. What's interesting is that last week we had some very heavy verses of admonition, a lot of things that Hashem was telling us if we don't behave nicely, then God forbid Hashem will bring about all kinds of difficult situations for the Jewish people. That is always read 2 weeks before Shavuot, but we don't go straight from the heavies into Shavuot. We always have a buffer, and the buffer is the portion of BAMIDBAR, which speaks about counting the Jewish people, how important the Jewish people are, the significance, the value, as we'll soon see. Why does Hashem count the Jewish people? Similarly, the other time that we read the heavies, similar to what we read last week, is 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. So it's like quite a serious time. We talk about what could befall the Jewish people if we don't behave properly, but we don't go straight from that portion into Rosh Hashanah. There's always one portion in between, which is the portion of Nitzavim, which talks about the Jewish people standing upright, strong, erect. So it speaks about the Jewish people in a favorable site, which is how we go into Rosh Hashanah, and now when we go into Shavuot. But there are additional specific connections to Shavuot and the portion of BAMIDBAR, because it says right at the beginning, look, Numbers 1:1, the first verse of the 4th book of the Torah, that's what we're talking about, begins by saying Hashem spoke to Moshe where? In the desert of Sinai. So why did Hashem talk to us in the desert? Hashem could choose any arena to talk to us from. Hashem could have decided that the communication of the Torah would happen in Jerusalem, in the holiest place on earth. He could have said in the most beautiful place on earth, in a valley that's lush with fruit, and even though there were miracles that happened around the mountain in the desert, but the whole environment of the desert is counterintuitive. It doesn't seem to be the perfect environment to receive the Torah. And yet, say all of these different commentaries, the Torah was given in a desert. First message we're learning is that a desert is ownerless. Nobody owns land in the desert. The desert is wilderness. It is wide open space that nobody lives in, nobody claims, nobody has rights to. It's out there in the desert. Torah was given there to tell us that it's given in an ownerless desert so that anyone who wishes to acquire the Torah may acquire it. You see, if he gave it in a particular section of the land of Israel, the tribe that was destined to receive that land in Israel would always say that they have first rights, that they're more important, that they are the ones that are really the recipients of the Torah. Everyone else is just added, but not real. So specifically, Hashem said, I'm giving it to you in a place that is ownerless, to tell you that anybody can take hold of the Torah, can acquire it, can study it, can become their own. You're not in anyone's backyard when you receive Torah. You are always in the presence of Hashem, being able to receive the Torah. Secondly, the desert implies that a person should surrender oneself like a desert to merit the words of Torah. Just as, thirdly, this is a bit of a second point, is just as the desert is endless, so is the Torah without end. So when you stand in the desert, you look in all directions and you just see sand, 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 all the way till the horizon. It looks as though it carries on forever, and the Torah is not bound. It doesn't have the boundaries that limit the extent of the Torah to have a particular border. So it's in the middle of this wide open space that seems to just go on forever until it meets the horizon, the skies touch the ground, and that's the environment of the Torah. It's endless. But also to surrender oneself. You know, we often think that what's better, a vessel that is full or a vessel that is empty? I guess you got to know what it's full of. You can't bet on buying something that's full if you don't know what it's full of. Maybe it's full of something that you don't really want, or that's counterproductive, or could be dangerous. But generally, we imagine that if the glass is full, it represents that you have substance, you have something. Empty implies that there's nothing there. But interestingly, when we come to receive the Torah, there is an advantage, there is a strength in being empty, or feeling empty in the presence of Hashem, because there's the maximum space to put into yourself the word of Hashem. When we come smug, arrogant, and we think that our own strengths define our ability to receive the Torah, so then there's much less place for the Torah to live inside of us. We take up too much of the space. And one of the vessels to be able to be a worthier recipient of the Torah is make yourself humble and open and worthy to receive like a desert. If we come smug and self-content, then we don't actually have place to put the Torah into. We get in the way. Another point that he said by the Friedricher Rebbe is Torah at Har Sinai represents the marriage of Hashem and Bnei Israel. That's what we say. Hashem married us on the mountain of Sinai. I often speak to brides and grooms, and I emphasize the fact that when Hashem was looking for a metaphor to describe his relationship with these people, he can, and at other times he does use many different metaphors. There's shepherd and sheep, there's parent and children, there's master, teacher, and student, there's brother and sisters. There are many different metaphors that are used in various places in the Torah to describe the relationship between Hashem and his people. But at Har Sinai, the most important communication that took place between Hashem and our people, and the most significant event since creation itself, and the reason that creation took place was for that moment. Hashem uses the metaphor of marriage, which goes to show how important marriage is in Jewish life, the responsibility and the blessing of being able to get married is not just the love between a man and a woman and a man. It's actually a relationship that represents, that Hashem chose to use as the descriptive means showing what his relationship is with his people. Now we know that before a marriage, you always have the ufruf, you have the Shabbos before. So the portion of BAMIDBAR in the desert is usually read on the Shabbos before Shavuot, just like we read and we call up the Chatan to the Torah on the Shabbos before going to the chuppah. This is our chuppah, yours and mine and everyone's, as we stand under Hashem's chuppah, when Hashem takes us as a marriage partner. And in a marriage, both sides contribute, give, receive, give. That's what Hashem turned us into. The worthy recipients to be the means by which Hashem's purpose in this world is achieved. And we are significant in the process of Hashem achieving that end. So this portion is called BAMIDBAR, that's the first word, and BAMIDBAR means in the desert, and it's relevant to the whole process of receiving the Torah. We mentioned about the third dimension, and there's a very interesting accumulation of midrashim that speak about the third dimension when it comes to the festival of Shavuot, when it comes to the Jewish people receiving the Torah. So let's start with that. The Midrash says that significantly, a Torah of 3 was given to a people of 3 on the third day of the third month. What does this mean? We are a people of 3. How are we a people of 3? Because amongst the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, we have Kohanim, we have Levim, and you have Yisraelim. There are 3 types of categories of Jews. Like when we get called up to the Torah, either as a Kohen or Levi or as a Yisrael. So we are a people of 3 dimensions, 3 types, 3 categories. We are also a Torah of 3. Why would the Torah be described as a Torah of 3? Because the Tanakh, which is the method by which we call, the means by which we call the Torah, stands for 3 different sections of the Torah. Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Nevi'im, which are all the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings, which are the latter section of the Torah, which includes some of the Megillot, Ruth, Esther. We have Megillot and we have Ketuvim. So we have 3 sections of the Torah. We have 3 sections of the Jewish people, and the Torah was given to us on the third day. It says that you will prepare for 3 days for the receiving of the Torah, and on the third day we'll be ready to receive the Torah. So the number 3 is mentioned in terms of time, and not the third day of the month, because the Torah was given on the 6th day of the month, but the third day of preparation. In which month? In month of Sivan, which we've just started yesterday, which is the third month, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. So we have 3, 3, 3, and 3. Everything seems to be centered around 3. And the question is, what's so important as 3? What does 3 represent? We would always think that the best number for anything to be is the number 1, because the number 1 represents unity, oneness of Hashem. 1 seems to be a much more powerful number to describe the Jewish people as a whole number of 1. We are 1 people. Why emphasize 3? So this is just a general journey which comes up many times in the Torah, in many different aspects of the Torah, and there are the 3 dimensions. You know, we start the davening every single morning with the words, Rabbi Yishmael Omer. Rabbi Yishmael teaches us the 13 methods by which the Torah is deduced, and one of them at the end says, one verse says something, another verse seems to contradict that something. And then the third verse comes to shed light as to how what appeared to be a contradiction is actually resolved. So we're going to go on a journey now to try and identify that sometimes when one is able to resolve the contrast and sometimes the contradiction, the opposition between 2 extremes, when you find the method by which there can be cooperation between different extremes, that's the third dimension that holds it all together. So it's not a oneness that denies the possibility of difference. It is acknowledging difference, but finding a strength to bring the 2 different directions together. Let's think of a whole lot of different examples. In these weeks before Pesach and Shavuot, we count the Sefirot. We talk about the human characteristics, the characteristics of the soul. For example, the first 3, the emotional characteristics is chesed, which is kindness, warmth, embracing. And then you have gevura, which is discipline, boundaries, strictness, law. So you have 2 very different emotions. The one is the source of ahava, of love, loving Hashem. And then you have the discipline, which speaks about the awe of Hashem, the fear of Hashem, the boundaries that are set because we acknowledge that we're standing in the presence of something much bigger. So we actually stand back. Chesed, the first characteristic, is the source of love, which is attraction, which is drawing close, which is bonding, warmth, discipline. Now, in any classroom, one knows that one has to have a healthy share of chesed and gevura. One without the other will never really work. You walk into a classroom, teachers that have just come out of college, every one of them believes that they're going to be the most unique, brand new, different teacher that is going to be able to teach with love only. And they come in and say to the kids, I love you and I care for you, and we're going on this journey together. And then there's a rude awakening that they've got to set boundaries. They've got to create an environment in which the children know there's time and there's place and appropriateness. You need respect of property, all of the things that have to happen. You need both. But it's the third characteristic, emotion, that we deal with in these weeks between Pesach and Shavuot, which is Tiferet. Chesed, which is to the right, Gvura, which is to the left. Tiferet is the synchronization of two opposite tracks. It is the mastery of these two opposite tracks that come alongside one another to produce the ultimate strength, the blend, the ability to incorporate both the chesed and the gvura, not to be caught up in only one and not the other, and to find a way that in the right time, in the right place, and in the appropriate measure, these two tracks work so beautifully alongside one another. That's the third dimension of Tiferes that says, I know that there's one track going this way. I know there's a different track. The ability to hold it all together is the third dimension. Now, most of Judaism works with these tracks because, as Maimonides, the Rambam said, just in the last days we're learning the Rambam, we started the cycle again. He mentions in one of the early chapters that a Jew should always look for the middle path, the middle of the road. Don't be extreme on either side. And we often imagine, what does it mean to live in the middle of the road? Middle of the road is when you dilute hot and cold, and they never exist anymore. You only have a new creation called warm. It's not hot and it's not cold. But nobody wants to live a life that's only lukewarm. It's insipid. It has no passion, has no excitement. Life is about encountering and engaging with extremes, but in a way that they come to work alongside one another for a bigger picture. That is the third dimension. Let's take a week. A week has 6 days of work. That's one track. And then you have Shabbos, which is a totally different track. And we don't have 7 days blending weekday and Shabbos. No, 6 days you work. The 7th day you completely abstain from work. And the ability to master the movement between the one track and the other track is the third dimension, is the bigger picture that holds these two different tendencies, these two different approaches, methods of connection to Hashem together in a bigger picture. That's the third dimension. Third dimension is when you are aware that there's one, and then there's a thesis, and then there is the antithesis, or as we say in English, the antithesis. You have a principle, and then you have the opposite of that principle. But then ultimately you want to have synthesis. And synthesis isn't the sacrifice or the blending together of opposites to the point that you never ever engage those extremes. The synthesis we talk about is the mastering of time, place, appropriateness, moment. When you use this track and when you use that track. The sum total of being able to master both tracks is the third dimension. And in so many areas in our life, we can actually see in ethics of our fathers, it says, if I'm not for myself, who then will be for me? That's the track of self-development. The Mishnah continues, if I'm only for myself, mani. What kind of human being am I if I'm only wrapped up in myself and make up a very small parcel? The mastery of the moments of self-development and the moments of self-sacrifice, of when we develop our own being and when we contribute our being to the wider good, is a mastery of two different tracks, and the ability to know the moment and to know the cause and to know the challenge and to know when to use each one of these tracks is the third dimension. So why is Shavuot so associated with the number 3? Because everything about Shavuot and the giving of the Torah is acknowledging that there are different tracks, one track and an opposite track. There's heaven and there's earth. There's the spiritual and there's the mundane. There's high and there's low. And the third dimension is that what Torah is wanting us to achieve is not the sacrifice of the spiritual, not the sacrifice of the mundane, but the ability to master life in such a way that we call on the mundane and we call on the spiritual dimension in their appropriate moments. We experience them in their own time, and that way the one influences the other, and our physical is enthused with elements of the spiritual, and our spiritual is enhanced by utilizing the physical to serve Hashem. If Hashem only wanted holiness, he would have created more angels who live on one track, holiness. He certainly didn't want to have a human being that was only involved in physical self-indulgence. There are animals that were created for that form, but the human, the Jew, the responsible recipient of the Torah, there we have to master the spiritual and the physical. We have to receive from on high and apply it here below. We have to raise from the below and elevate it to the high. That is the third dimension. And when we look at the actual progression of the months, we see something very, very fascinating. These 3 months, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, have an unbelievable blend. Watch this. The sign of the Zodiac, and I'm just going to say in parentheses, that the signs of the Zodiac have a relevance in the Jewish calendar, in the Jewish thinking, Jewish thought, not because we are defined, God forbid, by what sign in the Zodiac we're born under. We're not encouraging you to read page 22 of the star, like it was in the old days, or to go online and to read some person's thoughts about the future based on the signs of the Zodiac. No, we actually don't. We deal directly with Hashem. We don't deal with any of those distractions. But we do believe that there are seasons, as there are patterns in the astrological forms of the night sky that apply to different seasons and different months. And it so happens the month of Nisan, the sign of the Zodiac is Aries. So I'm emphasizing again that while we believe that there is an influence and energy that relates to the sign of the Zodiac in a particular month, it never defines us and it never takes away our free choice. There is no muzzle or time-bound opportunity that supersedes our choice. We always have choices. What is the sign of the Zodiac for the month of Nisan? Interestingly, Aries. What is Aries? A lamb. What's a lamb got to do with the month of Nisan and Pesach? Well, everything. Before we left Egypt, we had to take a lamb into our homes on the 10th of the month, tie it to our bedposts, wait a whole lot of days until the 14th of Nisan, and then we sacrificed the lamb. That was the Korban Pesach. That was the blood that was put on our doorpost to save the Jewish people when Hashem was destroying the firstborn of Egypt. So everything about the month of Nisan is appropriate to the lamb. Aries, the lamb. What's the next month? Iyar. This month, Iyar over here. The month of Iyar, the month of Iyar, where did that go? The month of Iyar happens to be the sign of the Zodiac in the month of Iyar is the ram. So you've got Taurus. And that is associated with the month of Iyar. Why is there a need for Taurus, the bull? Sorry, not the ram, the bull. Why is there a need for Taurus, the bull, following the lamb? Well, as we started the process of leaving Egypt, we had a call of duty, which was that of the lamb. What is the lamb? The lamb follows its leader. Like a shepherd is able to lead 1,000 lambs, they all follow. the sheep, we walk like sheep. When we use that idiom in English, what we mean is like sheep. They walk one behind the other, completely following a leader, sacrificing and completely handing over themselves to a higher force. That is the lamb, and there's something very admirable in it. But what is the deficiency in Hashem wanting to give the Torah to a lamb? How does Hashem know that we're going to be hardy enough, strong enough, resilient enough to withstand all of the pressures and difficulties that our people are going to go through for thousands of years? If we only have the ability of the lamb, we might be devoured by the 70 wolves. The lamb is too vulnerable and not strong enough in its own right to take on the world. So Hashem said, I will develop beyond the lamb the bull. The bull is the exact opposite of the lamb. The bull is violent, is like a bull in a china shop, has no containment. It is wild, it is angry, it is temperamental. The bullfight implies a beast that is filled with energy, that is wanting to do its own thing. That's the second. Hashem said, I want you to develop the ability to have resilience, strength, determination, power, the power of the bull, to be able to do the things that have to be done in this world. I don't want you to only be a sheep. I certainly don't want you to only be a bull. I want you to be able to find the blend of two opposite things that begin to look like they're doing the same thing. What's the third month? The month of Sivan. The month of Sivan is the month of Gemini. What is the sign of Gemini? Twins, two creatures, two beings that look the same. Two distinctly different people that look the same. That's the third dimension. The ability to take both the strength of submission, following Hashem like a sheep, the strength of self-development and growth, and the ability to have that power of person, but to be able to have the mastery of those two tendencies in the third dimension, where two things, two distinctly different things, begin to pull together. That's the power of the third month, the month of Sivan, the third dimension when it comes to giving of the Torah. It's fascinating. And in actual fact, if we look at life, not only the Jewish people as we receive the Torah, if we look at life, there are three major stages in the development of the adult human being. The first stage is the baby, the child. The attribute and strength of a child is to follow and to be there as a recipient of parental guidance. That's what happens in primary school. Nursery school, all the way through to primary school, the child is an extension of all the energies and forces that are directing the child. The parent is clearly the leader and the child is the follower. Boom. Then comes bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, and high school. And suddenly we say, I don't know what happened to this child. I don't know what happened. There's something came over my child. I don't know what happened. What happened is the child is going through puberty and now going through the teenage years. And the teenage years are everything but the lamb. The teenage years are the bull. That's when the kids are putting crossbones on their room and saying, enter at your own risk. And they are now living out all of their wildest meshugasan to the chagrin of parents and teachers, because a teenager, by design of Hashem, is a period in self-development in a human being, which is out to develop oneself. Self, this is me, mine, I. That is what a teenager is normally completely preoccupied with. Me. What's in it for me? And then when we graduate from both of those two growth periods in life and we become a mature adult, we master those two different extreme behaviors in a way that we can use both of them. We don't reject one for the other. We know how to utilize the moment. When is the moment to stand down? and to share and to give and to be giving and to say it's not about me, and I'm ready to forego my ego and to forego even my personal pleasure and goals and aspiration. I'm ready to forego. I'm ready to be the sheep. I'm ready to have that childlike element of innocence in me. And I'm also ready to take a stand, to be powerful and strong, not to be a pushover, to stand up for my principles, to stand up when everyone around me and peer pressure is pulling in a certain direction. I'm able to be strong and stand there. Adulthood is not that you've given up on childlike and you've given up on the teenage self-assertiveness, but the mastery, the third dimension, the ability to know when is the call for which moment. Is this a moment of submission, or is this a moment of extreme power, strength, assertiveness? And that ability to master those different opposite trends is the third dimension. That's what Matan Torah is teaching us, that we have a capacity to master extreme opposite situations, matter and the spiritual, mundane and the holy, all of these opposites. And that's the reason why the Torah, Hashem gave us the Torah in the month of Sivan, because when he looked at us, he said, can I give the Torah in the month of Nisan? Look how beautiful the Jewish people are, like sheep following me. I'm initiating everything that happens in Pesach is God initiating miracles, splitting seas, bringing plagues, doing everything on our behalf. We just have to follow. Hashem says it looks beautiful, but I'm worried. Is this people going to be able to withstand the challenges of the millenniums of history, that they're going to have to endure so many different challenges? I'm not sure. And therefore I could not. So he said, I want them to develop. What happens in the month of Iyar? We go through the 7 weeks counting the Omer. The whole month of Iyar is occupied with that. Growth, development, self-development from here below. I'm working on myself. I'm honing my strengths. I'm developing my strengths more and more and more. I'm becoming more and more powerful, more mastery of self. I'm growing from below. This is about me, not just following what Hashem does. The whole month of Iyar, Hashem isn't initiating. We are growing. We are developing. We are aspiring. That's the teenage years. Hashem said, that's really wonderful to see my people so powerful and strong. They are going to withstand all the challenges, but I don't know if I can withstand all of their challenges of me. They're so self-assertive that they're actually defying and denying and not at peace with the spiritual dimension. I'm going to wait for the third month, the month of Gemini, when there are 2 tracks, 2 separate, the twins, 2 separate beings that pull together and begin to look alike. Look alike in the sense that they're both here to serve Hashem. Our moments of submission and our moments of rebellion, our moments of handing over to a higher authority and our moments of self-assertiveness, they're all here to be handed over to Hashem. That is the power of the third dimension. Okay, I'm just going to end on this point that Hashem counts us. Hashem counted us when we left Egypt. He counted us after the sin of the golden calf to know how many people survived. When he manifested his presence in the Mishkan, which was the sanctuary of Hashem, he counted us again. And when we entered the promised land, he counted us. And the commentaries say, when does Hashem count? Like a person who has precious jewels and has joy in counting how many jewels, how many diamonds there are. 1, 2, 3, each one is so precious. Because of Hashem's great love for his people, he counts them all the time. So he counted them on each occasion where there was concern, worry about the Jewish people. He counted us again and again. That is the amazing strength that Hashem gives us the week before Shavuot. He counts us. He wants us to realize how much he loves us. And even though we live in a world in which we have to sometimes be admonished, and we had that last week, there's always another week before Shavuot where Hashem reminds us, I love you. I count you because you are precious to me. May we live up to what Hashem believes we can be, and may we be worthy recipients of the Torah, to receive the Torah b'pnimius in a way that affects us in an inner way, in a deeper way, in a meaningful way, in a long-lasting way, and in a way that is filled with joy and happiness, not to feel, God forbid, the burden of responsibility, but the privilege of the joy of Hashem. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi, for
Have a good
beautiful.
evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
God bless.
Shabbos Shalom.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Happy Shabbos and Chag Sameach, everyone.
Thank
Chag
you.
Sameach.
Have a wonderful Yom.
You too. Chag Sameach.
Good.